Praise be to Jesus Christ and welcome to Catholic Forum. I'm your host, Deacon Jim Thorndell. I want to welcome all those who might be joining us on public TV and those who are listening to us on podcast. Tonight we have an interesting conversation. We're being joined by the Michigan Catholic Conference people today. And the question I would ask is how many of us Catholics understand or know what Michigan Catholic Conference is? And if we do we know what it does for us? And tonight I think we need to open up some minds of our Catholic people to have an understanding of what it is that you do for us. First of all, I want to welcome Rebecca Masti.
Correct, Masti.
Yeah, Masti, nice to have you.
Thank you.
Tom Hickson.
Deacon.
Nice to have you here. And Dave Maluchuk.
Yes.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You know, this is an important issue, and as we discussed before we came on television here, I'd like you to give us a little understanding of the history of the Michigan Catholic Conference. So, Tom, would you like to start?
Well, sure. I'll take
Either one.
Yeah. Well, the Michigan Catholic Conference was founded in 1963. It was sort of a time when we had Vatican II had just wrapped up, and the Michigan had developed a new constitution. The 1963 Constitution is what we're operating under today.
Okay.
And the bishops decided, you know, we need to have a presence at the Capitol. We really need to have a presence to lobby the legislature to make sure that Catholic issues take forefront.
Yes.
And that's when they formed the Michigan Catholic Conference, and they've been in existence. In fact, this year is our 50th anniversary of the Michigan Catholic Conference.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. And who actually started it? Was it the bishops that came into collaboration on that and started it?
It was Cardinal John Dearden, who was the Archbishop of Detroit at the time.
Okay.
And he felt he was a participant in the Vatican II proceedings, and really felt that that was a time to get things going in Michigan, to get laity involved in the political atmosphere, and also to have representation at the Capitol to make sure that our issues were not being forgotten about.
And we as Catholics constitute about 25% of the population in the United States. It's probably about the same thing in Michigan, I would imagine. That probably the numbers are about the same.
That's correct. There's about 2.25 million Catholics in Michigan. The Catholic Conference is governed by a board of directors that includes the 7 diocesan bishops of Michigan.
Okay.
The Archbishop of Detroit serves as the chairman of the board. We have 5 laypersons, a religious sister, and a diocesan priest who serve on our board of directors. And we're a very unique organization. We're a nonpartisan organization. We address a wide breadth of issues of concern to the church within Catholic social teaching.
Okay.
We discuss policies that address human life and dignity, marriage and families, economic justice, restorative justice, health care, educational choice, and right now a big issue that we're talking about is the issue of religious liberty.
Yes, and these are absolutely critical to our Catholic understanding. Now, Dave, I understand you're Director of Communications.
That's correct.
And what does that encompass?
Well, I have a role at the organization to work with the members of the news media to make sure that when they're covering legislative issues that are of importance to the conference, that they understand our position and they know where we're coming from and a little bit of history, why we either support or oppose an issue.
Okay.
So that's an important role to make sure that the conference does have a voice in the public square, not just through the legislative process, but also through the secular media. So folks that are reading the paper or watching on television or listening on the radio can understand why the Catholic Church is taking the position that it is, and either, as I say, supporting or opposing the legislative policy.
Yeah, so in many ways there's some catechesis going on even to the secular media and what's going on within our Catholic Church.
Well, we try to help them understand where we're coming from, and we don't talk about specifically the pastoral teachings of the Catholic Church. We talk about an issue, why it's good or bad for the common good of the state if it elevates the moral fiber of the state of Michigan, and we bring our voice from the perspective of Catholic social teaching to the public square.
Okay. And Tom, your position is Vice President of Public Policy.
That's correct.
Give us a little understanding what that is.
Well, as Dave is responsible to deal with the news media, I'm responsible to deal with our senators, governor's office, our elected representatives, and congresspeople to make sure that our voice is heard, and also manage a staff such as Rebecca. We're very blessed to have Rebecca on staff. We were able to poach her away from the Montana Catholic Conference, and I'm sure Rebecca will get into that in a little bit, but certainly working with the legislature, developing those relationships to make sure that our voice is heard in the media from Dave's side, but from our side, you know, in the halls of the state legislature in D.C.
Yes. Before we turn to Rebecca, let me ask you this. How was your relationship with the senators and congressmen and all that at the state level?
Well, really, we are a nonpartisan organization.
Okay.
It could be said that we're politically homeless. So many issues of ours tend to be on the Republican side, and so many tend to be on the Democratic side. It
Right.
really doesn't matter. So we're really of neither party.
Okay.
We have to get along with everybody.
Right.
We make sure that every 2 years, there's term limits in Michigan, which has taken effect over the last about 15 years.
Yes.
Every 2 years, you have a tidal wave of folks going out.
Yes.
And new ones coming in. So we make sure as a conference that all of us, Rebecca and myself, and sometimes Dave and others from our staff, will go around and meet with every single new lawmaker. It doesn't matter what party, doesn't matter what part of the state they're from.
Okay.
But we meet with them all to make sure we can develop that open line of communication
Okay.
at the minimum.
So you really stay apolitical. You're for the people and in the truth that would of the moral context.
That's correct. We're a nonpartisan organization. We do not support candidates. We do not support political parties. We
Okay.
do not make campaign contributions. We bring our voice.
Okay.
And that's really what we have, and that's what we bring to the process. And we think that's what's most important, that I think in the legislative process and the reality of the political world, there are folks out there that make campaign contributions, they endorse folks, and that's how a lot of organizations operate.
Yes.
And that's not the Catholic Church, and that's not the Catholic Conference. We bring our voice for the common good to the public square, and we seek to propose rather than to impose.
Okay.
And that's the role that we see ourselves as an organization.
But always under the umbrella of Catholicism.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Excuse me, Rebecca. Policy advocate, correct?
Correct.
Explain to us what that is.
Well, in addition to working with the legislators, as Tom mentioned, what we do is do committee hearings
Okay.
where we testify and let the legislature know how we stand on certain bills of great importance.
Okay.
We work one-on-one with the legislature. We do outreach activities to parishes. Recently, we spoke in Grand Rapids.
Yes.
They had the conference on human trafficking and immigration.
Yes,
And we had the
important issue.
opportunity, definitely. It was wonderful to be able to go and speak with, and share a little bit about the issues that
Exactly.
we're working on.
I think it's important for our viewers to understand a little bit of your background too. You're a Grand Haven native, correct?
Yes.
And then a graduate of Michigan State University.
Yes.
With a bachelor's degree in science.
Yes,
Is
I
that
was
recall?
a science and math teacher
Okay.
for a
Oh.
number of years.
Then I think the Lord must have been speaking to you, because now you're an attorney. Went through Ave Maria Law School, correct?
Yes. I think you're right. The Lord was leading me along a different path.
Sure.
I had a desire to work on pro-life, pro-family type issues for a number of years, and I was trying to figure out how exactly can I do that,
Yes.
and decided to go to Ave Maria School of Law, partly because of the mission of the school and to earn my law degree, because I thought that would be an avenue to
Absolutely.
to work on these issues, and had the opportunity to study and meet a lot of really wonderful people there, and it led me out to Montana, to the Montana Catholic Conference, for the opportunity to lobby in a different state.
And that's where these guys stole you from, right?
Yes.
Well, we're glad you joined them on that.
Thank you.
Let's get into some of the advocacy, some of the issues that you're dealing with right now. And I know there are many. And one of them, we said, the hot topics right now is really religious liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, but you're also, you brought in human trafficking
Mm-hmm.
and all these issues that are going on right now. Tell us about some of the issues that you're dealing with right now.
Well, we can start with religious liberty, if
Okay.
you'd like.
Please.
It is a great issue across the country and within the state. Across the country, most noted is the federal Health and Human Services abortion drug mandate,
Right.
which has come down. But there's also other items at the federal level and at the state level impacting immigration, for instance, and telling churches whether they can or cannot help documented individuals. And these mandates by the government are causing the church and individuals to have to violate their conscience.
Yes.
And so the fight for religious liberty has arisen from these.
Yeah, and it continues on. You're probably, are you in the battle for the Marriage Act and all that too? What's going on within the Constitution of many of the states? Is that something you get into also?
Marriage is definitely on our radar. Obviously, that has a big issue at the federal level and
Yeah.
at the state level. And any efforts to redefine marriage, we will work to oppose.
Okay.
We're very much interested in protecting the state constitutional amendment that came about in 2004
Yes.
that provides for marriage between one man and one woman. And we're looking, keeping an eye on what's happening at the federal level as well as issues within the state.
How did the Supreme Court ruling that they ruled for California, how does that affect a state like Michigan down the road? When the Supreme Court justices ruled that California continue on?
Well, we have a court situation down in the Metro Detroit area in federal court. Rebecca, maybe you want to speak to that. Actually, you've gone to a lot of those hearings, but it talks about two unmarried individuals that are trying to adopt jointly.
Yes.
And that's something that goes against our teaching, certainly.
Sure. So that is the DeBoer case in Federal District Court in Detroit, and that originated by two women who had separately adopted children and wanted to jointly adopt them, which our state adoption statute does not provide for. It only allows for married couples or single individuals to adopt children. And as a result of the court proceedings and so forth, that court case has now been amended to include a direct challenge to the state constitutional marriage amendment. It's forthcoming. There should be very soon hearings to see where that goes. It's possible it may go to trial.
Okay. So there's a lot of things on your plate right now, and you're working on these all simultaneously, I'm sure.
Yes.
As you go through this. You know, the one thing I was interested in too, as we had talked about that, one of the issues was this human trafficking. I don't think people really understand the depth and the scope of what's going on with a lot of that. Can you explain that to us a little bit?
Sure. Human trafficking is a big issue for the state, and fortunately we have an Attorney General, Bill Schuette, who is willing to take up this issue.
Yes.
Senator Judy Emmons is a local senator, and she is willing to bring this issue to light and has been touring the state with Teresa Flores, who is a victim of domestic trafficking. So there's domestic trafficking, which deals with American citizens, and international trafficking, where immigrants are being trafficked. There is, under federal law, two types of trafficking. There's labor trafficking and sex trafficking.
Okay.
The common theme between those, though, is force, fraud, and coercion are used to entrap individuals. And with the AG's task force, they're trying to identify not only legislative means to address this issue in the state, but also the social service providers, ways that we can help them.
Okay.
And a variety of other means. You asked me before the show how many victims of human trafficking there are, and it's very difficult to identify. The State Department estimates that there's thousands each year that are trafficked.
But not in Michigan alone.
No, throughout the country.
Okay.
I think the last time they gave a number, it was 16,000 to 17,000
It's way too many.
trafficked. But that information is very hard to come by, and so that the Michigan Task Force is going to be looking at what are some ways where we can obtain some of this information to get a better handle on what's really happening in the state.
And it's such a clandestine operation in human trafficking that how could you ever possibly report the accurate numbers? That would be, as you're saying, it'd be difficult to do, wouldn't it?
Yes, it is very difficult, and often it's sometimes hard to identify. So education and awareness and training is a very big aspect of it, training law enforcement, because there are times where individuals, a bust is made, and individuals who are being trafficked are treated as criminals because they weren't identified early on that they were actually victims. And so by training law enforcement, they're able to tell, up front whether somebody is a victim or not, and then provide them the proper services. How
many of them would, out of fear, not want to come forward also and admit that they're involved, there's something that's going on within them, they're part of the human trafficking?
Well, that is an issue as well, and that I think the term is that Stockholm syndrome, where individuals who have been abused sometimes don't recognize that they're being trafficked or don't recognize the abuse, and at times even when they're rescued, they've developed a bond with their trafficker and tend to kind of have. It's hard to break that bond. And so there's a lot of psychological and emotional issues that need to be dealt with in a manner to ensure people.
In conjunction with that, then, do you get involved with women and children who've been battered, who have been abused in domestic relationships or anything like that? Or is that something you get into at all? Well,
there's social service providers around the state that work with individuals in that regard. Catholic Charities, for example, Bethany Christian Services. And so we don't deal with a direct social service contact with victims.
But yes, that would be protective of the poor and vulnerable people that are victims of trafficking and other abuses, we certainly would step up for legislation like that.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. How do you work collaboratively? I mean, what would be the process on a daily basis? How would you work as a group? That's probably a tough question, but let's see if
I
we...
don't know, that might be a little too inside. We have a very wonderful working relationship. We get along very well as a staff. We came from Lansing today, and we had a great car ride on the way here.
Wonderful.
But, Tom does an excellent job. Tom is a veteran of the legislative process. He knows the issues very well,
Okay.
and he brings those to the attention of his staff. And I tried to bring some of the support from a media perspective. So we're constantly in communication. It's a very fluid process. We get along very well. We constantly bounce ideas off of each other. We have terrific leadership at the organization. The Michigan Catholic Conference has been blessed with terrific executive leadership,
Okay.
as well as our board of directors. The bishops of Michigan are absolutely phenomenal. So we feel very blessed in that regard to be able to have that kind of environment where we can work on behalf of our faith and bring our professional experience to the process to promote the common good in Michigan.
Yes.
Absolutely. We have a nice West Michigan flavor on our board, too, with the new Bishop Wackowiak. We're
Yes.
very blessed to have him coming on board, and Bishop Bradley down in Kalamazoo, and then we also have Father Leonard Sudlick from Ada.
Yeah, of course.
He's the priest.
All good, strong Catholic men that are
Yes.
really going to be a marvelous addition for that too. You know, I know that your work is never going to be done because it's a constant issue because we're humans. And there's got to be some negative sides to this too. I mean, what is it that sometimes you sometimes say, my gosh, there's so much to be done. What can really kind of make it seem almost daunting, the task of what you're doing?
Well, I'll tell you, when you've had a country that's been around for 200 years and a democracy, there's bound to be some hiccups. One of the things this country was founded upon was the freedom of speech and the freedom to exercise your religion. That's one of the bedrock principles of this country.
Yes.
And, you know, it's frustrating, I think, for us when you see folks that want to, they think that's one of the pieces of the Bill of Rights that maybe you can toss aside.
Yeah.
That some other good or some other special interest idea is worth trumping over someone's religious ability to exercise their religion.
Right.
You know, right now we're promoting some legislation, and it's not easy going. There's a Senate bill, Senate Bill 136 is out there. It's gone through the Health Policy Committee, and it's over on the Senate floor right now, and we're really trying to get that thing moved through the
Can you
Senate
tell us what that
process.
is?
Yeah, certainly. It has to do with religious liberty and protections,
Okay.
specifically in the area of healthcare. And Rebecca, would you like to talk a little bit about how that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So it covers three sort of categories. There's healthcare workers, there's healthcare facilities, and as well as healthcare payers. And it provides conscience protection for all three segments in that group. For example, with healthcare workers, they would be able to inform their employer ahead of time of any procedures that they foresee that would be objectionable to obtain exemption from having to perform those procedures.
Okay.
So it has a real good balance between patient care and conscience rights for the workers, but also included in that is sorry, I just lost it.
All the payers.
The
So if you're purchasing insurance, such as
Right.
An organization like ours, the Michigan Catholic Conference provides for health insurance for Catholic workers, both at our organization and outside, we don't want to be forced to, say, provide for abortion-inducing drugs in our
right.
benefit plan.
That's right.
And currently you have the federal United States Department of Health and Human Services mandate out there. We don't want to have something like that happen in the future at the state level. We don't really fear that today under this governor and this legislature. We don't fear that. But in the past, certainly,
Yes.
we've seen threats, and we think in the future, it's just a matter of time before some governor or some future legislature says, you know what, everybody's got to provide for abortion coverage in their health policy.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that. And if you're a nurse or a pharmacist, we've got a pharmacist here in Grand Rapids that has been vocal.
Yes,
saying that
absolutely.
he owns his own pharmacy. He wants to be able to provide what he wants to provide in his pharmacy and not be forced by the government to provide certain contraceptive devices or
Yeah.
maybe abortion-inducing drugs in his pharmacy. And this bill would protect him to be able to follow his own conscience.
And the fear is too is sometimes we seem to think we've won a battle, and so the tendency sometimes can be to relax a little bit. I have to imagine this is an ongoing, intense battle that you have to stay on your toes all the time to continue on with this
Well,
battle?
see, it seems like every day there's something new that's coming forward. But
Yes.
one thing that I often keep in mind, and I think everyone else does too, is the popular saying that from Mother Teresa, we're not called to be successful,
Amen.
but we're called to be faithful. And
That's
so
right.
we continue to do what we can to the best of our ability.
And the best thing of it is we know God is still in control.
Correct.
He still has it in His providence, in His hands. But you know, as you go on this journey, what do you see? What is going to be the, if I might say, the major issue you're going to be speaking about or talking about in the next month or two?
Well, we know that religious liberty is going to be with us for a while. These threats that are taking place at the national level with
Yes.
the policy that Rebecca mentioned and Tom mentioned about the Health and Human Services mandate. We know that there is a problem with grants that are given to organizations that conduct assistance. We were talking about human trafficking.
Right.
The U.S. Catholic Conference lost their grant through their Migrant and Refugee Services Committee because they don't refer for abortions, even though they were a top-rated organization that provides those services. But the reality is there are organizations that want to push faith-based institutions out of the public square.
Yes, of
and
course.
that's been going on for some time, and we're well aware of what's taking place there. And we do have to remain vigilant.
Yes.
You mentioned these policies are constantly coming. The bill that Tom discussed, the Conscience Rights in Healthcare, Senate Bill 136, actually was voted out in the House of Representatives back in 2004.
Is that right?
And so this policy is now 9 years in the making. There was very broad bipartisan support 9 years ago. Senator Jansen and Senator Hildebrand have been very helpful here on the west side of the state in supporting that legislation. We're very thankful for those on both sides of the issue that support the cause to make sure that faith-based persons do not have to participate in objectionable, non-emergency elective procedures.
Yes.
And it's a very common sense policy that's been enacted in numerous states across the country. The United States federal government, Congress has passed numerous laws that deal with conscience rights. And so we feel very good that this is a policy that is pro-First Amendment, it's pro-Bill of Rights, it protects religious liberty policies. We want to bring the First Amendment and religious liberty protections back to the central square. We want to make sure that that's a foundation from which our democracy can continue to build. I mentioned there are those who are looking to push that farther away from the public square, and we're doing what we can to make sure that we're on the side of the First Amendment.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Religious liberty, if you don't mind, Deacon, is certainly something that does not mean you can go to church and you can have the, pray with the candlelight in your home. It means that you can act and live out in your conscience and live according to honor your own conscience.
Yes.
And that's something that we don't believe is a Republican or Democratic issue. We think
not.
it's a bipartisan issue, and that people and the founders of this country created this country based on that. We have another piece of legislation out there that's sponsored by Democratic lawmakers, which has to do with religious liberty for students, school children that are going to class and they have a perfect attendance record, for instance. And let's say they're a Jewish individual or a Catholic student that wants to go to Good Friday or Ash Wednesday service at a public school. This bill would say their perfect attendance would not be ruined if they have a religious ceremony they have to go to for their faith. So this is something that really we're excited about that one.
Yeah, you should be.
It involves both parties, and we need to have a common sense approach here.
Yes, we do. This country was built on religious freedom, as you all know, and when we start losing even a little bit of that, it starts to threaten the good of all of the people in the United States. What do you see right now as your major battle? If you had one, if you had to speak of something right now, what would you be telling people that's one of the major battles in your life for this?
In terms of something that we're
Yes.
working on, well, with religious liberty, just some things that had come to mind previously is that often, obviously, we're talking in the Catholic context, but religious liberty is for people of faith and people of no faith at all.
Yes.
And it's an opportunity, to exercise their belief. And if we lose that, it becomes a very slippery slope. For example, with some of the mandates that are coming forward, if the government can mandate, for example, the Health and Human Services mandate, what else can they
Exactly.
mandate?
Exactly. You really open up a Pandora's box when they allow that to happen.
You really do. And what we're looking to do is we want to bring more Catholics, make them more aware of what's going on in the legislative process.
Wonderful.
We know that the church teaches very strongly that it's the role of lay Catholics to advance the common good. It's not always the role of the clergy and the bishops to do so.
Sure.
So at the Catholic Conference, what we're doing is try to grow our grassroots advocacy network.
Wonderful.
We have several thousand people that are currently signed up, but we're trying to get more people to come to our website, micatholic.org/can.
Thank you. Well, we still have time. Say that website again.
www.micatholic.org/can, and people will receive a weekly update of legislative policies that are taking place. And they can also contact their elected officials either in support or opposition to a bill.
I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It was an important discussion. I'm going to continue to pray for your ministries, because these are ministries that you really are helping Catholics understand what is going on with their legislatures.
Thank
Rebecca,
you very
thank
much.
you for being here. Tom, we appreciate
Great to
it.
meet you.
Thanks so much.
Dave,
Deacon.
thank you for being here.
Appreciate the time.
And continue on this fight, because it is so necessary, and that we know that we have these young, strong Catholics that are fighting for us. And thank you again for being there for us. Again, I want to say, give all praise to Jesus Christ in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.